Chapter 1. The chandelier above Crown Hall throws 300 faces into gold, and every single one of them is looking at me. Not with sympathy, with relief. Tavian Cross stands at the center of the banquet floor in white ceremonial silk, both hands pressed flat against his stomach, his eyes wet with the kind of tears that take practice. Alpha King Rhett Calder stands beside him. Rhett's hand rests at the back of Tavian's neck, possessive and steady, the way it used to rest against mine during treaty signings when he needed the room to believe we were unshakable. I am wearing black. I chose black this morning before I knew the exact words Tavian would use. I chose it because 6 hours ago, a palace courier delivered a sealed medical envelope to the wrong office. My office, the one nobody remembers I still use because I stopped reminding them. Rhett clears his throat into the microphone. He says Tavian is carrying the royal heir. He says it the way a man announces a problem he has finally solved. I do not flinch. I do not cry. I stand at table 9 in my black dress clothes with a glass of untouched champagne, and I watch Rhett's face while he speaks, and what I find there is not shame. It is not even guilt. It is the specific expression of a man who has been carrying a heavy object for a very long time and has just set it down. He is relieved. That detail cuts deeper than the announcement. The affair I had already survived in my chest for 9 months. The pregnancy I had already seen in the paperwork. What I had not prepared for, what no amount of planning protects against, is watching the man who marked your throat look at his replacement and breathe easier. Tavian turns his face toward me across the room. He smiles the way expensive things smile when they know you cannot afford them anymore. The land transfer document sits beside Rhett's champagne, and signed still, because Rhett was waiting for the ceremony to end before adding his signature. The document authorizes the sale of 7 federally recognized Omega settlements to a private security corporation operating under Oren Slate's holding company. I know what sits beneath those settlements. I know what Oren wants from that land. I have known for 4 months, which is exactly how long I have been deciding what to do with that knowledge. I make my decision now. I set my glass down without a sound. I slide the platinum bond ring from my finger and place it directly on top of the transfer document beside Rhett's untouched drink. The people nearest to me go very still. I look at Rhett across 300 witnesses, across military officers and PAC representatives and 2 sitting federal judges, and I say it quietly enough that only the front tables hear, but I say it clearly enough that the words will travel by morning. By sunrise, you will understand what just walked out of this room. I turn and I walk toward the east corridor. Behind me, Tavian's voice rises into the microphone, theatrical and bright. He says some Omegas are built to stand beside kings, and some are built to give kings their futures. He says it like it is a comfort rather than a declaration of war. Rhett says nothing. That silence follows me all the way to the emergency corridor behind the kitchen, where my bag has been sitting since 7 this morning. At the security panel beside the loading dock, I press my thumb to the biometric reader. The system recognizes me as primary architect. Every camera feed between my location and the outer gate goes dark. Not because I destroyed them, because I designed them with a secondary authorization layer that Rhett's security team never knew existed. Because no one ever asks the royal consort how the palace works. They only notice the palace working. I walk out. I do not run. Behind me, inside Crown Hall, the first consequences begin quietly. The elevator banks freeze mid-floor. Armory access requires a secondary code that routes back through my authentication, now suspended. Every land transfer document I previously signed as royal co-signatory enters automatic federal legal review. I did not steal Rhett's kingdom. I simply stopped holding it together. The convoy leaves through the outer service gate. My driver, a man I have trusted for 3 years, takes the Tacoma route. The rain is heavy and the bridge lights are weak, and I am watching the encrypted drive in my inside pocket and thinking about Oren's face when he realized I had left. The way his eyes moved to the door before Rhett even finished speaking. The way fear moves through a man who has something to lose. What hurt most was never Tavian. Cruel people announce themselves eventually if you wait with enough patience. What destroyed something permanent inside me was Rhett's silence. The years of silence, the way a good man can participate in harm simply by choosing not to look at it, and call that choice stability. I am still thinking about this when the black truck appears behind us without headlights. It does not slow down. It accelerates. The impact throws my driver sideways. The convoy spins across wet concrete. I grab the door handle with both hands as the truck rams us a second time, harder, and I feel the road change beneath the tires, feel the terrible smoothness that means we have left the surface of the bridge, and there is nothing on my side of the vehicle but open air and the black water of the Puyallup 200 feet below. The rear window shatters. My driver is not moving. Chapter 2. I pull my driver's seatbelt free with both hands and push him down across the console before the vehicle finishes its spin against the construction barrier. The metal groans. Holds. Barely. I have exactly 4 seconds before whoever is in that black truck reaches our doors. I use 2 of them to check my driver's pulse. Alive. Unconscious. I use the other 2 to pull the encrypted drive from my inside pocket and push it into the waterproof lining sewn into my waistband 3 weeks ago when I first understood that leaving might require surviving. The rear door will not open. I go through the broken window. Glass takes both palms. I register the pain the way you register weather, present and irrelevant. I drop onto the wet concrete of the unfinished bridge and move immediately because standing still is a decision with only one outcome. The freight yard sits 200 meters east, industrial and dark, full of containers stacked 6 high and automated crane systems I spent one afternoon studying 3 months ago when I realized the bridge expansion project ran directly alongside Orin's most sensitive import route. I run. 2 men come around the truck fast. They are not palace guards. Their equipment is private security issue, the same manufacturer whose logo appears on the holding company documents I pulled from Orin's budget amendments. They are not here to bring me back. The first container row swallows me whole. I move left, then immediately right, using the wet ground to mask my footsteps by stepping on the metal drainage strips between gravel rows. Bond pain fires through my chest with each stride, my body punishing me for the distance from Rhett's mark, but I have been managing this pain for 9 months in increments. I know its rhythms. I know where it peaks and where it drops. I press against the side of a blue container and listen. 2 sets of footsteps. Then a third. Then nothing. Then a voice very close and very level. They have him cornered at Section 7. A pause. I would not go into Section 7 if I were you. The voice is not mine. It comes from directly behind the men following me, from between 2 black freight containers where the light does not reach, and it carries the specific quality of someone who has stood in dangerous places so often that danger no longer changes his register. I see him step out. Broad, dark wool coat. The kind of physical presence that does not need to perform itself. His scent reaches me before his face does, and my wolf, which has been screaming inside my chest for 40 minutes, goes completely silent. Cedar smoke. Cold iron. Something underneath both of those things that I do not have a word for except that it feels like the moment before a storm breaks when the air pressure changes and your body understands something your mind has not caught up to yet. Alpha Blaze Mercer, governor of the Columbia Coalition, Rhett's most capable political opponent. The man whose territory shares a border with 4 of the 7 Omega settlements listed in Orin's transfer document. He should arrest me on sight. Instead, he looks at the blood running from both my palms and his jaw tightens, just slightly, just enough for me to see the thing he immediately controls. Are you being followed by 1 vehicle or 2? 3 men on foot, I say. The truck driver stayed with the vehicle. He nods once like I have confirmed something he already calculated. What happens next does not feel like a rescue because he does not perform it like one. He does not step in front of me. He moves beside me and waits half a second to see which direction I choose, and when I move left toward the crane control station, he moves left without comment. I use the automated crane to drop a 40-foot container across the drainage row behind us. The impact shakes the ground. The men pursuing me scramble back. Blaze has already disabled their vehicle, methodically, without urgency, like a man completing a task he found only mildly interesting. The third man fires twice. Blaze moves in front of me, not dramatically, just completely, his body between mine and the sound of the gun, a decision that happened faster than thought, and then the firing stops because Blaze's return fire is precise and the man chooses retreat over conviction. We stand in the wet silence of the freight yard. My lungs burn. My palms drip onto the gravel. My wolf is so quiet it frightens me more than the gunfire did. Blaze removes his coat. I say, "Do not touch my throat." He stops. He does not argue. He does not explain that he has just helped me survive or that his instincts are probably screaming as loud as mine. He simply holds the coat out by the collar and waits. "Then tell me where I may touch you." I take the coat myself and put it around my shoulders. He examines one attacker's dropped weapon. He reads the manufacturer code on the receiver and his expression closes in a way that tells me the information means something specific to him. These men are not from the palace. No. They belong to a private contractor registered under a shell company in Olympia. I look at him. You already know that company. It has been operating inside my territory for 14 months. He helps me into his vehicle without touching anything I have not permitted. We leave the freight yard as the first police helicopters appear over the bridge. Inside the vehicle, my hands are steady enough now to open the encrypted drive on his secured reader. The first file is security footage. Tavian Cross entering Oren Slate's private apartment. The timestamp reads 6 months ago. The second file loads. It is a message log between my driver and an unregistered number. It contains my exact evacuation route. Chapter 3. The lighthouse sits on a ridge above the Washington coast where the land ends without apology. Just rock and then water and then the kind of darkness that has no interest in what you carry. Blaze does not explain why he has a renovated safe house on the coast. I do not ask. People who build emergency exits before they need them are people who understand that the moment you need one is never the moment you have time to build it. He gives me the east room. Wood floors, one window facing the water, a lock that works from the inside only. He does not suggest I rest. He does not tell me I am safe. He says there is a physician coming at first light who does not report to Rhett or anyone connected to Rhett, and then he closes the door and I hear his footsteps move away down the hall without pausing. That single thing, him leaving without waiting, breaks something open in my chest that the gunfire and the bridge and the blood on my palms had not. I sit on the floor with my back against the bed frame because the mattress feels too soft for what I am currently holding, and I breathe through the bond pain in the slow, deliberate way I have been practicing since the night 10 months ago when I found Tavian's scent on Rhett's coat collar and understood that my marriage had ended without anyone informing me. I had not left that night. I need to say this plainly because the difference between what I did and what people assume I did matters. I stayed because 3 days before I found that scent, I had pulled an internal budget audit showing military payments routed through a humanitarian relief fund connected to the Omega settlement territories. The numbers did not align. I began tracing them. What I found underneath took 4 months to fully map, and every single month of those 4 required me to be inside the palace with access to systems only the royal consort could touch. So I stayed. I managed the pain in controlled intervals. I collected documentation. I let Rhett believe I was simply the quiet, cooperative Omega the court had always preferred me to be, because quiet people are underestimated and underestimated people can move through rooms that locked doors would stop anyone else. What I did not expect was that Oren would act before I finished. Tavian's announcement was timed. I understand that now, sitting on this floor. The banquet was chosen because it would fill the room with witnesses and cameras, and it would make my reaction the story instead of the transfer document sitting beside Rhett's champagne. They needed me emotional and public and discredited. I gave them calm and a ring on a federal document instead. Before dawn, Blaze leaves a tray outside my door. Hot water, clean cloth, a written note in even handwriting that says the physician will arrive at 6 and that my authorization to use the lighthouse's encrypted network requires only that I ask. He does not knock. He does not open the door. He leaves the tray and walks away. I open the door after I hear him reach the stairs. The water is the right temperature. I do not know how he knew what temperature I needed. I tell myself it does not matter. At 6, Marin Holt arrives. She is a beta physician with short silver hair and the specific efficiency of someone who has treated injuries in places that do not appear on official records. She examines my palms, my bond scar, my vitals. She asks whether I have been experiencing gradual numbness in my secondary scent glands over the past 2 to 3 years. I tell her yes, but I assumed it was bond stress. She asks to see my last 6 months of pharmacy records. I pull them from the encrypted drive. She reads them in 4 minutes of total silence, and then she puts the tablet face down on the table between us and looks at me with the expression of someone choosing their words with the precision of a surgeon choosing an incision. She tells me that my bond stabilizer prescription, the one Rhett's medical office authorized and the Palace Pharmacy filled every month for the past 34 months, contained a secondary compound not listed on any of my medical charts. A compliance suppressant. Pharmaceutical grade. Slow release. The kind used historically in facilities that housed omegas against their will before the designation protection laws passed. The kind that dulls the ability to challenge direct alpha commands, that flattens assertiveness into something the court could comfortably describe as calm, appropriate, mature. It also suppresses secondary scent markers, which is why the court's physicians kept noting that my bond scent was weak and fading and inconsistent with a healthy royal pairing. They created the evidence for my own replacement. I sit with this information for a long moment. Then I ask Marin who authorized the original prescription amendment. She shows me the digital signature at the bottom of the pharmaceutical order. Rhett's personal authorization code. Not Oren's. Not Tavian's. Not a forged version of Rhett's code with mismatched pixel spacing that would hold up in a basic forensic review. Rhett's code. His actual code. I do not make a sound. Outside the lighthouse window, the Pacific crashes against the rocks below, indifferent and enormous, the way the ocean has always been indifferent to what humans do to each other on the land above it. Chapter 4. Blaze finds me in the encrypted office at 4 in the morning with every pharmaceutical record, authorization log, and budget amendment spread across 3 screens, and my hands completely still on the keyboard. He reads the authorization signature on Marin's findings. He does not say anything immediately, which is how I know he understands what I am about to do. I say, "He drugged me for almost 3 years." Blaze says, "Walk me through the authorization chain before you decide what that signature means." I want to refuse. Every part of me that has spent 9 months holding itself together while the man I love chose convenience over integrity wants to take this evidence and use it like a weapon and stop being careful. But I have seen what happens when people in pain move faster than their proof. I walk him through it. What we find takes 2 hours and changes everything. Rhett's authorization code appears on the original prescription. But the pharmaceutical amendment, the one that added the compliance compound to my stabilizer formula, was inserted into the record 11 days after Rhett's signature. The file modification timestamp had been masked, but Blaze has a forensic analyst on his staff who works nights and answers encrypted calls, and she finds the mask in 40 minutes. Rhett signed a routine bond stabilizer order. Oren amended it afterward without Rhett's knowledge. This does not make Rhett innocent. His negligence made the abuse possible. He signed documents without reading them, authorized prescriptions without reviewing their contents, and trusted Oren with administrative access to systems that controlled my medical care. Recklessness in a position of absolute power is its own category of wrong. But he did not deliberately drug me. I sit with the difference between those two things and understand that one of them is easier to carry than the other. At Crown Hall, the morning briefings are going badly. Blaze receives a secured report at 6 from his own government contacts. 3 interstate treaties require Holden Keene's secondary authentication to proceed. Rhett's financial office has discovered that the annual contributions supporting legal protection for 7 Omega settlement communities were funded through a private trust registered in my name. A trust Rhett did not know existed because he stopped reading the full financial disclosures 3 years ago when Oren took over the quarterly presentations. I built the stable kingdom Rhett believed he had built. He presented it at summits. He signed the credit. He genuinely believed his administration had created it. The difference between a man who steals and a man who simply never asks where the prosperity comes from is smaller than comfortable people want to admit. By 7, Rhett has ordered Palace Security to locate me using the emergency bond trace protocol. The protocol requires both parties' biometric data to function. My biometric data is registered to systems I designed. The trace returns an error code. I watch it happen in real time on the Lighthouse network. Then I turn back to Tavian's medical file. Blaze obtained it through a source I do not ask about, from a clinic operating under Oren's holding company. I cross-reference the conception date against the timeline of Tavian's documented access to the royal residence. Tavian's pregnancy is genuine. The baby is not Rhett's. The conception date falls 11 days before Tavian's first verified entry into the royal wing. The fertility clinic's internal record, the one not included in the version submitted to the palace physician, shows a different sperm donor code. I run the donor code against Oren Slate's personal medical file, which I obtained during my audit 8 months ago and kept because I understood instinctively that Oren was the kind of man who stored his most dangerous secrets in the most official-looking folders. The code matches. Tavian has been carrying Oren's child the entire time. The plan assembles itself in front of me with horrible clarity. Tavian seduces Rhett. The affair is real but strategically initiated. The pregnancy is announced publicly before Rhett has seen independent verification. The succession crisis creates legal and political cover for the land transfer. Once the heir is established, Oren controls the throne through the child because Tavian is manageable and Rhett is increasingly dependent on Oren's financial expertise. Then I understand the deeper layer. The Omega settlements sit above mineral deposits. I found this in a geological survey buried in the same budget folder as the military payments. Rare earth elements required for military-grade energy storage, the same technology Rhett has been trying to acquire through foreign defense contracts for 4 years. Oren was not selling the land for profit. He was selling it to fund Rhett's military expansion using money taken from the people Rhett's own designation protection laws were supposed to defend. And Rhett received documented warnings that the settlements were experiencing coercion complaints. 3 separate federal memos addressed to his office over 18 months. He chose not to investigate because the money was solving a budget problem he did not want to explain to his defense ministers. Blaze has been quiet behind me for several minutes. Then he says, "My younger brother disappeared from the Cascades settlement 26 months ago. The official report said he relocated voluntarily. He has never contacted our family." I turn around. His expression is the controlled version of something much larger. I say, "You have been investigating this longer than I have." He says, "I have been looking for him since the report came through." A new message arrives on the encrypted network from a federal investigator Blaze has been working with for 14 months. It contains a recovered transport manifest from a private medical logistics company connected to Oren's holding corporation. Among the listed Omega residents secretly transferred out of Washington state, near the bottom of page 3, is the name Callum Mercer. Status field. 3 words. Alive. Royal Medical Custody. Chapter 5. I want to move the moment I read Callum's name on that manifest. Blaze stops me with a single look, not a command, not the territorial pressure of an alpha asserting control, just the look of a man who has made the mistake of moving too fast on emotion before and is carrying the specific weight of what that cost him. He says the word carefully. Evidence first. I say, "There is a man alive in royal medical custody because Oren Slate put him there." "There is a man alive," Blaze says, "who will remain alive only as long as Oren believes no one is coming. The moment we move without documented proof, Oren has 12 hours to transfer him somewhere we cannot trace and 48 hours to make the transfer look legal." I know he is right. Knowing something is right and accepting it require 2 separate decisions. I make both and pull up the encrypted network. I contact Delaney Price through a routing protocol that bounces the signal through 4 separate servers before it reaches the palace's internal maintenance channel. Delaney is a beta analyst who spent 3 years helping me audit medical discretionary spending before anyone at court thought to wonder why the royal consort cared about pharmaceutical line items. Delaney is careful, thorough, and loyal to accuracy rather than to whoever is currently signing the budget approvals. Delaney confirms what the manifest suggests. A private fertility clinic funded through a subsidiary of Oren's holding company has been operating beneath a legitimate women's health network for at least 2 years. The clinic's official patient roster lists voluntary participants. The internal roster, which Delaney locates through a procurement invoice misfiled in the palace kitchen renovation budget, lists a separate category. Research participants. Transferred. Designated Omega. Non-voluntary. Delaney sends 12 files before signing off. Blaze and I drive to Olympia at 2 in the morning. The corporate archive we need belongs to a logistics company that shares a registered address with 4 of Oran's shell entities. The building has private security and a biometric entry system on the 3rd floor server room. The 1st and 2nd floors are accessible through a maintenance credential Blaze has held for 8 months, obtained legally through a coalition environmental compliance inspection. Blaze handles the physical entry. I handle the encryption on the server room door. The system is good. Not as good as the one I built for the palace, but good enough that it takes me 19 minutes instead of 8. Blaze spends those 19 minutes doing the specific nothing that competent people do when they are waiting, which is standing in a way that makes them look like they belong in the space they are occupying. Inside the server room, I pull Tavian's complete genetic file, the unredacted version that the palace physician was never shown. I pull the procurement chain connecting Oran's holding company to the private security contractor whose equipment I identified on the bridge. I pull the transport authorization orders for every Omega listed in the manifest. Blaze finds a secondary file folder labeled with a date from 4 years ago. It contains the original geological survey of the Cascades settlement territory. Handwritten notes in the margin identify the mineral concentrations and their estimated market value for military energy applications. Someone has circled one figure twice in red. The figure is large enough that I understand, in a way I had not fully understood before, why people were willing to commit serious crimes to access it. At the bottom of the margin notes, in the same handwriting, is a name. Not Oren's name, a name I do not recognize, and I have read every significant document in Rhett's administration. I photograph it and keep moving. We are in the vehicle with everything we need before 4 in the morning. Then my phone receives a public alert through the news network. Tavian is on national broadcast, sitting in a pale blue chair in what appears to be a private sitting room inside the palace, his hands folded over his stomach. His eyes red at the rims in a way that reads as grief to cameras and reads as performance to anyone who has watched him work a room. He tells the interviewer that Holden Keene threatened his unborn child before disappearing with sensitive government materials. He says he fears for the safety of the heir. He says he has always known that Holden resented him, and he is only speaking now because the evidence of Holden and Governor Mercer's connection, which he presents as romantic and conspiratorial and pre-existing, suggests that Holden's departure was not a response to the pregnancy announcement but a coordinated move. Edited footage appears behind him. Blaze and me in the freight yard, shot from an angle that removes the armed men. It looks like a meeting. Within an hour, 3 major news organizations have picked up the story. Within 2 hours, Rhett signs a fugitive designation order with my name on it. Blaze watches the broadcast without expression, and then he looks at the geological survey photograph on my phone and then at me, and something passes through his face that I cannot fully read except to understand it contains more than political calculation. He says, "They anticipated the archive move. Tavian had someone watching the logistics company, which means he knew what we were looking for before we found it." I look at the file Blaze pulled from the archive, the secondary folder with the geological survey, the unknown name in the margin. Or someone told him we were coming. We drive back toward the coast in silence. At 11 that night, I wake to something that should not be there. My secondary scent glands, the ones the suppressant had been flattening for 3 years, have been recovering slowly since Marin confirmed I stopped taking the compound. Tonight, for the first time, they are working clearly enough to catch a scent that does not belong in the lighthouse. Gasoline. And underneath it, very faint, the vanilla and white tea of Tavian Cross. Chapter 6. The gasoline smell hits the back of my throat like a warning I am already too late to use. I am out of the bed before my feet find the floor properly, moving on instinct alone, grabbing the encrypted drive from the nightstand and pressing my back against the wall beside the door rather than in front of it. The lighthouse alarm should have sounded 40 seconds ago. It has not made a sound. Someone cut it from outside, which means they were already positioned around the building before I woke up, which means the gasoline smell is not a threat arriving. It is a threat already placed. I pull the door open a half inch. The hallway is dark and smells like the ocean and cedar smoke, and underneath both of those, very faint, the same gasoline that woke me. Blaze's door at the end of the hall is open. Not broken open. Open the way a door opens when the person inside heard something and moved toward it. He is already up. I move into the hallway low and quiet and reach the top of the stairs in time to see the front door come off its upper hinge from a single impact. Two men in dark tactical gear come through the gap before the door finishes falling. A third goes around the back. Blaze shifts. It happens fast the way large things sometimes happen fast. Not dramatic, just sudden and total. And the wolf that fills the entryway below me is the gray-black of storm clouds over the coast, enormous and absolutely controlled. He takes the first man down in 2 seconds. The second fires. The shot goes wide because Blaze is already moving, but the third man comes through the kitchen and he has a clear angle on the staircase landing where I am standing, and I am not a wolf and I am not armed, and the only thing between me and that barrel is about 4 feet of open air. I drop flat against the stairs and reach sideways for the emergency panel I noticed on my second day here, the one mounted flush with the baseboard that Blaze's staff probably installed without telling anyone what it controlled, because people who build safe houses always put the most important switch where guests would never look. I flip it. The lighthouse floods with darkness so complete it has texture. Then the lens above us activates. The original Fresnel lens in the lighthouse tower, the one I spent one afternoon studying because I study everything that might become useful, begins rotating. Its beam sweeps through the cracked upper windows of the building in controlled intervals, and every time it passes through the ground floor it throws a blinding wall of white light directly into the eyes of anyone facing outward, which is where trained security men look when they lose visibility. The third man fires twice at the ceiling by reflex. I am already moving down the stairs. I reach the kitchen, find the backup server I activated 2 days ago, and push every file we pulled from Olympia to 4 separate encrypted offsite servers in under 90 seconds. Whatever happens to us tonight, the evidence survives. Blaze shifts back in the entryway. He is breathing hard. There is blood beneath his left ribs. The third man is unconscious on the kitchen floor. I do not ask how. Blaze presses his hand against his side and looks at me with the specific expression of someone taking a damage inventory and choosing not to report the full findings. I say, "Sit down." He says, "We need to clear the perimeter first. You have a bullet in your side. Sit down." He sits. I work by the light of my phone screen, which I keep angled away from the windows. The wound is a through and through, which means I do not have to go looking for anything, which is the only good news available in this room. I pack it with the medical kit from under the kitchen sink, the kind of kit that exists in safe houses specifically because the people who use safe houses have already decided that hospitals create records. His breathing steadies under my hands. The cedar and cold iron of his scent thickens the way it does when his body is working hard, and underneath the pain there is something else reaching through it, something warm and focused, and I understand with a clarity that the 3 years of compliance suppressant had been dulling that my wolf is not quiet around him because he is powerful. My wolf is quiet around him because he is safe. I realize my hands have stopped moving. He is watching my face. I say, "Tavian was never here." His scent was sprayed outside to make sure I would know this was personal. He wanted you scared. He wanted me to know he could find me anywhere. Blaze reaches up and covers my hands with one of his, very gently, not pulling, just covering. I should move. I do not move. I say, "I know what gratitude feels like. I have felt it enough to recognize its edges. This is not gratitude." I look at him directly because I have spent 3 years learning to say difficult things in empty rooms to no one, and I am finished doing that. I feel you before you walk into a space. My wolf sleeps when your scent reaches me. I wait for your footsteps in this building the way I used to wait for nothing, because nothing was what I had learned to expect. And I am telling you this now because the last alpha I trusted taught me that staying quiet about what I needed was the price of belonging, and I am done paying that price. Blaze is very still. He says, "My former mate died 4 years ago. Border crisis. I received 3 warnings before it became critical, and I chose strategy over urgency every single time." He exhales. "I have kept every person since then at a distance I called protection." He cups my face in both hands. He does not pull me forward. I close the distance. The first contact is almost unbearably gentle. He goes completely still when our mouths meet, like he is memorizing the fact of it before allowing himself to respond. I grip his shirt and kiss him again. His restraint breaks quietly, like a door finally opening that has been held shut a very long time, and his hands stay at my face the whole time, careful and certain, like I am something he is choosing to hold rather than something he has caught. My phone lights up on the counter behind us. Delaney's name. Video call. Urgent flag. I pull back. Blaze lets me go immediately. I answer. Delaney turns the camera without speaking. A row of locked medical rooms. Pale light. The smell of antiseptic visible somehow even through a screen in the way that institutions carry their atmosphere into every image they appear in. The camera moves to the last room on the left. Callum Mercer stands at the window with his arms crossed. Thinner than any photograph Blaze has shown me. But standing, but breathing, but alive. Behind him, seated on the narrow cot with a blanket pulled over her shoulders, is a woman whose face I have not seen since I was 4 years old. My mother. Chapter 7. Blaze sees her before I say her name. He sees me stop breathing and he takes the phone from my hand without asking, keeps the camera on the room, and says to Delaney with the controlled steadiness of someone managing a situation rather than experiencing it. Where exactly is this location inside the palace? Delaney whispers the sublevel number and signs off. My mother's name is Laurel Keene. I was told she died of a cardiac event when I was 4 years old. I was given a death certificate. I attended a funeral. I grew up visiting a grave in Portland that I now understand contains someone else entirely, or nothing at all. She is alive and she has been held in a private medical sublevel beneath Crown Hall for reasons that I need to understand completely before I allow myself to feel what is currently trying to move through me. Blaze wraps the medical bandaging around his ribs with one hand and looks at me across the lighthouse kitchen. He says, "Can you hold this together for the next 6 hours?" I say, "I have held things together for 9 months. 6 hours is nothing." We reach Delaney's contact inside the palace sublevel through a system Blaze routes through his coalition's encrypted emergency channel. Delaney moves carefully, pulling Callum out first through a maintenance corridor that connects to the palace's original 1940s infrastructure, which was never updated because Rhett's renovation budget prioritized visible spaces over functional ones. Callum walks out on his own. He is thin and quiet, and he looks at his older brother through Delaney's camera feed with the expression of someone who stopped expecting rescue long enough ago that its arrival requires recalibration. Then Delaney goes back for my mother. Laurel Keene walks into the maintenance corridor and looks directly at the camera as though she knew exactly who would be watching. She says, "Holden, I need you to listen to me very carefully before you do anything." She tells me everything in 11 minutes. My mother descended from the Nakamura Keene line, the original governing family of the Washington coastal territories before Rhett's grandfather, Alpha Garrison Calder, staged a political purge 31 years ago. Garrison eliminated every documented member of the line to secure his claim. My mother survived because a sympathetic court physician falsified her death record and placed her in federal witness protection. She was pregnant with me when she ran. She hid my identity by registering my birth under a common designation code, removing every genetic marker from my public record, and placing me with a foster family in Portland with instructions to raise me without knowledge of my bloodline. Rhett's court selected me as a royal consort 7 years ago without knowing who I was. The selection was made because I was quiet, capable, and appeared to have no political family connections that could complicate the alliance structure. They chose me specifically because they thought I had nothing. Oren Slate discovered my true identity 14 months ago through an illegal genetic comparison. He ran on all palace residents following a succession security review. He did not tell Rhett. He began the compliance suppressant protocol immediately, using the medication access he had quietly established through the palace pharmacy. He needed me diminished and discredited before the Succession Council noticed what the ancient bloodline laws would mean for the throne. Under the original Washington Territorial Charter, which Garrison Calder suspended but never legally dissolved, the surviving heir of the Nakamura Keene line holds a prior claim to any governance structure built on territories his family administered. That heir is me. Blaze sits very still across the table when my mother finishes. I understand the shape of what this means before I can stop myself from understanding it. I could take Rhett's crown with a legal argument that bypasses every modern political structure he has built. I could end this tonight with a piece of paper older than Rhett's family name. And then I would be doing exactly what Garrison Calder did. reaching backward into inherited power and using it to remove someone from a throne by force rather than by accountability. Blaze says quietly, "What do you want?" I tell him I want Oren in federal custody and the settlement residence home and the reproductive program exposed and Callum out of that building and every Omega whose name appears in that clinic's internal records given legal recourse. He says, "And the crown?" I say, "The crown is not justice. It is just a different version of the same system. We extract Callum and my mother through the coalition's emergency transport before dawn. Then Tavian moves. He kills the palace's external communication relay, trapping Delaney inside. He sends a single message to my phone containing one line of text and an attachment. The text says, "Send me the original Nakamura-Keen genetic archive from the Lighthouse server or your mother goes back into that room tonight." The attachment is a live feed from a holding room I do not recognize. My mother sits in it. Tavian got to her between the maintenance corridor and the transport vehicle. Delaney's signal drops completely. Then Rhett calls my personal line for the first time since Crown Hall. His voice is stripped of the performance he usually wears the way other people wear cologne. He sounds like a man who has finally run out of the specific kind of denial that requires constant maintenance. He says he knows where Tavian has taken her. Then he says the thing that makes my blood go cold. He says Oren is not planning to use the baby as leverage anymore. He is planning to eliminate Tavian and the child before sunrise and frame the disappearance on me. He says it like a man confessing. Then he says, "I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I am asking anyway." Chapter 8. I arrive at the palace's private east entrance with Blaze at my side and every piece of evidence we have copied to 6 separate servers in 3 different states. Rhett is waiting in the map room, not the throne room, not the council chamber. The map room, which is where he used to work at 2 in the morning when he thought no one in the palace knew he was awake. I knew. I always brought him coffee he never thanked me for and spread the documents he needed before he asked for them and left quietly enough that he could pretend he had managed alone. He looks at Blaze's mating mark on my throat for exactly 2 seconds and then he looks away and does not look at it again. The room holds the 3 of us and the weight of everything that has not been said between Rhett and me in 9 months. And I let it sit there because I am not here to manage his emotions anymore. That was the old version of me. The one the suppressant helped keep cooperative. Rhett lays out what he knows. Oren spent the last 48 hours quietly liquidating his personal accounts and transferring operational control of 4 shell companies to a registered entity in a non-extradition jurisdiction. The logistics suggest he is preparing to disappear. Before he does, he needs one final act that closes every liability. Tavian knows too much. The child, if born and tested, proves the paternity deception. Both of them are loose ends Oren is no longer willing to manage. Rhett received this from his personal intelligence officer, a man who has been reporting to him alone for 11 years and who delivered the information in person rather than through any channel Oren could monitor. I ask Rhett why he is telling me this instead of mobilizing his own security forces. He says his security forces have 3 ranking officers who report to Oren's office for secondary clearance on domestic operations. If he mobilizes through official channels, Oren will know within the hour. I ask him what he wants from me. He says he wants me to use the palace systems I built, the ones his security team still cannot fully access, to locate where Oren is holding Tavian and my mother. I look at him for a long time. Then I say, I need the formal bond dissolution documents signed before I touch a single system in this building. He does not argue. He does not negotiate. He opens the drawer beside the map table and removes a document that is already prepared, already dated, already waiting, as though some part of him knew this moment was coming before I did. He signs it in front of Blaze as witness. The bond breaks completely when his pen lifts from the page. It is not like the slow tearing of the past 9 months. It is clean the way a cut is cleaner than a bruise, and the pain is enormous for approximately 45 seconds and then it is simply gone, and the absence of it feels like a room after furniture has been removed, strange and spacious and oddly quiet. Blaze does not touch me. He stays close and lets me find my footing without making it something I have to acknowledge. Rhett watches this and says nothing, and I understand that his silence right now is not indifference. It is the specific grief of a person who has finally identified what he destroyed and knows that naming it does not restore it. I access the palace systems through the East Corridor panel. My biometric clears everything in under 4 seconds. I locate Oren's secondary holding facility in 11 minutes. It is not inside the palace. It is a converted sublevel beneath a private medical building 2 miles from Crown Hall, registered under a non-profit shell entity that files annual reports to a committee Oren chairs. Blaze coordinates the extraction through his coalition's field team, which has been positioned in Seattle since we left the lighthouse, because Blaze plans in complete sentences and acts in complete movements and does not leave operational gaps. We move. The sublevel has 4 security personnel when we arrive. Blaze's team handles them in under 3 minutes. Tavian is in the second room. He is not restrained, but he is shaking, which is the first time I have seen him produce an emotion that was not designed for an audience. He looks at me with the expression of someone who has spent weeks performing contempt and arrived at the moment where the performance has nothing left to run on. He says, "He was going to kill my baby." I say, "I know." He says, "I did everything he asked." I say, "I know that too. My mother is in the 4th room." She stands when I open the door and she crosses the space between us and puts her hands on my face the way the dead do not, the way only the living can, with warmth and pressure and the specific weight of a person who is actually present. She says my name once. I do not cry until she says it a second time. Blaze stands in the doorway and does not come in and does not leave, which is exactly what I need from him, which is the difference between a person who protects you and a person who understands you. Later, when my mother is in the coalition medical team's care and Tavian is in federal custody and Oren's location has been flagged to every law enforcement jurisdiction that can legally act on it, Blaze takes me to a secure room on the coalition transport and closes the door. He stands across from me and says he needs to ask me something. I say, "Then ask it." He says, "The mark I gave you was made when you were still carrying everything alone. If you want to revisit that decision now that you have your mother back and the evidence secured and your bond dissolved and the room to breathe, I will not hold you to something you chose in the middle of a war." I look at him in the quiet of that room and I understand that this is the kind of love that announces itself through what it offers to give up. I cross the room and take his face in my hands. And I choose him again, slowly, with full knowledge of what I am choosing, with no suppressant in my blood and no grief driving the decision and no survival instinct borrowing the vocabulary of romance. Just me. The cedar smoke fills the room. Beneath my skin, in the place where his mark sits, something ancient and warm begins to move. Chapter 9. Every emergency siren in Seattle's Royal District activates at once. Not the modern alert system Rhett's administration installed 4 years ago. The older one, the one running through copper wire beneath the original 1940s infrastructure, the one that should not be active because it was officially decommissioned when the palace was renovated. It is active now. Blaze looks at the mark on my throat. I look at my hands. Beneath the skin of my left wrist, running up toward the inside of my elbow, a line of bioluminescent silver is moving through my veins like current through wire, slow and deliberate and completely outside anything I understand from biology or bond science. My mother's voice reaches me from the next room. She says, "It has recognized you." She comes through the door already dressed, already steady. The specific posture of a woman who has been waiting for this moment for 30 years and rehearsed her composure accordingly. She explains it quickly because there is no time for ceremony. The Nakamura-Keen territorial governance system was encoded into a biological authentication layer by her grandmother, the original architect of Washington's pre-Calder civil infrastructure. The system was designed to recognize the bloodline heir at the moment of a voluntarily completed bond, the theory being that anyone who had learned to choose love freely had demonstrated the core requirement of governance, which is the ability to make decisions for others without making those decisions about yourself. The siren is the system's alert. It is telling the city that a recognized heir has activated. The palace's ancient defense network follows immediately. Rhett's modern command codes stop working. Not because I hacked them, because the system beneath his system has simply reasserted its own hierarchy. Rhett calls Blaze's phone. He says his loyal guard units are refusing override commands on 4 critical perimeter points. He says Oren has been located moving through the palace's east tunnel with 2 armed escorts and a portable server containing the original Nakamura-Keen genetic archive, the one stored in the palace subbasement under a false historical records designation. Oren knows what the activation means. He is going to destroy the archive before I can use it as legal standing. Without that archive, the old charter claim takes months of court verification. Oren's legal team can delay proceedings long enough for him to disappear cleanly. Blaze and I reach the palace in 7 minutes. The ancient defense network opens every gate I approach. Military drones overhead realign their patrol patterns away from me the way weather moves around a fixed point. Stone wolves carved above Crown Hall's main arch illuminate from inside their own material, amber light filling the seams of the carving, which should not be physically possible and which 3 palace guards stare at without moving because there is no protocol for what they are seeing. We go underground. The east tunnel is original construction, narrow and damp, lit by emergency fluorescents that flicker when Oren's team passes security panels they no longer have authorization to clear. I can hear them ahead, 2 sets of boots and Oren's voice giving clipped instructions to someone on a phone. Blaze signals me to stop at the junction. He goes left. I go right. Oren's escort hears Blaze first because Blaze is physically larger and chooses to be heard, drawing both armed men in his direction, which leaves Oren alone at the archive access panel with a portable drive and the specific urgency of a man trying to commit a final act before the consequences of all previous acts arrive. I step out of the shadow and stand directly behind him. He turns. He looks at the silver still moving faintly beneath my skin and at Blaze's mark at my throat and at the complete absence of fear on my face, and something happens to his expression that I can only describe as the moment a very long performance finally runs out of audience. He says, "You cannot hold me here. You have no legal authority." I say, "The federal investigators standing at the tunnel exit behind you were called 40 minutes ago by Governor Mercer's legal team. Every charge, every document, every transport manifest, and every internal clinic record is already in their possession." He reaches for the archive drive. I activate the tunnel's emergency lockdown through the panel beside his hand. My biometric overrides his entirely. He cannot move the drive. He cannot open the access panel. He cannot transmit anything. Blaze brings his escorts in from the left junction, restrained and disarmed, and the federal team enters from the east exit, and Oren Slate, Chief Financial Minister of the Western Pac Territories, architect of a 2-year trafficking and coercion operation, stands in a tunnel beneath a palace whose deepest systems no longer recognize his authority, and he has nowhere to go. The arrest takes 40 seconds. Oren says nothing when they take him. His silence is the particular silence of a man who has spent a career understanding leverage and has finally arrived in a room where he has none. Tavian is already in federal holding. He cooperated with investigators for 4 hours before we reached the palace, providing names, dates, and transaction records in exchange for a formal plea agreement. His testimony will take months to fully process. His unborn child will be born in a secure medical facility under neutral PAC oversight and will carry no political title. We return to Crown Hall's main chamber at dawn. The emergency council has assembled without being called, which is what happens when a city's ancient alarm system activates and every security feed in a royal palace switches to an authentication hierarchy no living administrator created. Rhett stands at the front of the chamber. He has already removed his crown from his head. He is holding it at his side like an object he borrowed from someone and has finally found the appropriate moment to return. He looks at Blaze's mark on my throat and then he looks at the council and he says, clearly and without the performance he has always wrapped his public statements in, that he is relinquishing his title voluntarily to prevent loyalist conflict and that every financial decision made through his administration's emergency budget channels will be subject to full federal audit. He looks at me last. He says, "I chose stability over honesty every time they conflicted. I called it leadership. I want you to know that I understand now what it actually was." The council turns to me. The old charter is on the table. They offer me the crown under the original territorial law. The chamber is completely silent. My mother stands at the back of the room. Blaze stands beside me. I look at the crown and then at the council and I say, "I will accept temporary administrative authority for the duration of a constitutional transition only. What I am offering this region is not a crown. It is a charter." I lay a document on the table beside Rhett's crown. 7 pages. Drafted on the coalition transport with Blaze reading every line and Callum Mercer providing 2 legal references he had memorized during his confinement because he had nothing else to do with his time, and he is, as it turns out, a licensed public interest attorney. The charter establishes elected governance, independent courts, designation protection laws with criminal enforcement, medical consent requirements for all pharmaceutical interventions in bonded partnerships, civilian oversight of private security contractors operating in PAC territories, and a compensation structure for every Omega listed in Oran's clinic records. One council member says, "This eliminates inherited authority entirely." I say, "Yes." Another says, "Including yours." I say, "Especially mine." Rhett's loyal general, a man who has served the Calder line for 22 years, steps forward. He sets his command badge on the table beside the crown. Then he signs the charter. Chapter 10. Oren Slate receives federal sentencing 14 weeks later. Life imprisonment without territorial parole under a joint PAC and federal jurisdiction agreement. The first of its kind in Washington's legal history, written in part by Callum Mercer, who leaves the Coalition Medical Facility after 6 weeks of recovery and accepts a position with the newly formed Designation Rights Legal Cooperative 3 days after that. He does not thank Blaze for finding him. He shows up at a coalition briefing one Tuesday morning, sits down at the table, and begins reviewing case files, which is how people who have survived serious things sometimes choose to say that they are going to be fine. Tavian serves an 11-year sentence under the plea agreement. He provides complete testimony in every case connected to Oren's network. His unborn child, a boy, is born healthy in March under neutral PAC medical care. He is placed with a vetted foster family in Oregon and given a name that belongs only to him, connected to no political line, claimed by no succession argument. He is just a child. That matters. Rhett loses his title, his administration's financial holdings gained through the illegal contracts, and his mating claim, which was already dissolved but which the council formally vacates from the public record. He is not imprisoned. The investigation concludes that while his negligence enabled serious harm, he did not design or direct the trafficking operation. The distinction matters legally. Morally, it is a smaller comfort. He releases a public statement in which he does not ask for forgiveness and does not excuse himself. He names every decision he made where he chose what benefited him over what was true, specifically and without softening the language. It is the most honest thing I have ever heard him say publicly, and I read it once and do not return to it, because accountability from someone who hurt you is not the same thing as healing, and I have learned to stop waiting for other people's reckonings to complete something in me. The charter elections are held in April. The first elected council of the Washington Coastal Territories includes 4 Omegas, 2 Betas, and 3 Alphas, none of whom hold inherited titles or PAC bloodline authority as qualification for their seats. I attend the inauguration and then I go home. Home is the lighthouse on the coast. Blaze and I did not make a formal announcement. We did not hold a ceremony. We are building something that does not require an audience, which is new for both of us in different ways. For me, because my entire adult life was performed in front of other people who were measuring whether my behavior reflected well on someone else. For Blaze, because he has spent 4 years treating emotional distance as a form of protection and is learning, slowly and imperfectly, that proximity does not always mean loss. He is learning it one day at a time. So am I. My mother lives in the east room of the lighthouse, the one Blaze gave me on the first night, the one with the window facing the water. She spends mornings reading territorial law and afternoons walking the ridge above the coast with the unhurried pace of a woman who has somewhere to be for the first time in 30 years. She told me, the week after the charter was signed, that she spent 3 decades believing she had failed me by running. I told her she gave me the only thing that could not be taken away by a man with a signature and an authorization code. She had given me myself before anyone else got to decide what I was for. The compensation program for Oran's clinic victims processes its first 47 cases in the initial quarter. Legal recourse, medical support, housing assistance, and priority placement in the new designation rights framework. 47 people who were moved through a system that treated their bodies as research materials and their homes as mineral assets, receiving acknowledgement that what happened to them was a crime and not a policy. 47 is not a large number. It is the beginning of a larger number. Crown Hall's private royal wing opens as a public legal and medical resource center in May. The first Omega who walks through the door on opening morning is 19 years old and has a forced pharmaceutical compliance complaint and needs someone to explain his legal options. Delaney Price is at the front desk. She explains his options. One evening in late May, Blaze and I sit at the lighthouse table with the window open and the Pacific doing what the Pacific does, which is exist with total indifference to human schedules, and he asks me if I am afraid of what comes next. I tell him I am afraid of becoming comfortable with power. I am afraid of believing that because I used authority carefully once, I will always use it carefully. He says that fear is probably the most important thing for a person in my position to carry. I say that I plan to carry it every day and revisit it every time someone in the new council structure defers to me in a way that bypasses the process we built specifically to prevent that. He says, "That is the difference between you and Garrison Calder." I look at him across the table. He is not flattering me. Blaze does not flatter. He states what he observes with the straightforward quality of a man who decided long ago that honesty was more useful than comfort. That is still the thing I trust most about him. He kneels at the next civilian council session, not before me, but before the council itself, formally requesting that the Columbia Coalition enter a mutual governance treaty with the new Washington territorial structure as an equal partner under the Charter's shared sovereignty clause. The council votes yes in 9 minutes. He looks at me from across the chamber and there is nothing performing in his face, no strategy, no positioning, just the expression of a man who is exactly where he chose to be. We walk back to the lighthouse that night along the ridge above the coast. The long way, without talking, our shoulders touching in the dark. Rhett announced that another Omega would give him his future. He was right. That Omega built a structure that outlasted his crown, chose a love that did not require his permission, and came home carrying nothing borrowed and nothing owed. Rhett gave me to the wrong story. I wrote a different one. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss what comes next on this channel. Every story here is built for people who need to be reminded that quiet does not mean powerless, and leaving is sometimes the most courageous thing a person can do.